The great chamber of the Galactic Congress hung in the darkness of space like a jewel caught between two burning stars. Athera stood before the assembled representatives and felt her 3 hearts beating in different rhythms. Her presentation flickered on the holographic display behind her, while 47 species watched with varying degrees of interest and boredom. The humans were real, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. High Counselor Dren shifted his massive frame in the central seat, and his eye stalks curved toward her with something that looked like pity. Scholars, Athera, he rumbled, we have entertained your theories with patience, but the Congress has urgent matters to address. She knew what he meant. Everyone knew the Kryn Empire and the Telhari Coalition were 3 days from open warfare. Border skirmishes had killed thousands already. This is urgent, Zethra insisted, gesturing to the artifacts displayed in the holograms around her. These symbols appear on ruins across 17 different worlds in every corner of known space. Ambassador Vokris of the Kryn Empire rose from his seat, with his scales rattling in agitation. Ancient graffiti. He hissed the Kryn, do not waste time on bedtime stories while our borders are violated. They were not stories, Zethera said. Pulling up another image, the humans existed, and they gave us the stars. Laughter rippled through parts of the assembly. Telhari representative made a sound like wind through hollow tubes that Zethera had learned meant mockery. Next you will tell us they had magic powers and could move faster than light without jump gates. The Telhari said yes. Zethera replied exactly that. The laughter grew louder. High Counselor Dren raised one massive hand for silence. Scholar, your passion is admirable, and your research is thorough by the standards of mythology, he said. But we have no evidence that this species ever existed beyond folklore. Every culture has their version. Zethera pressed on, desperation creeping into her voice. The Valerians call them the sky teachers who lifted us from our caves and showed us the stars. The Korvathi speak of the first wanderers who mapped the dark roads between worlds. Even the Kryn have legends of the enough, Ambassador Vokris shouted. The Kryn have legends of many extinct species, and we do not build policy around ghosts. Zethera felt her resolve cracking, but she had one more piece of evidence she had saved. Because it was the most controversial and the most important 3 months ago, she said quietly. Our deep space monitors detected a signal that got their attention. Counselor Dren leaned forward, and the chamber fell silent. What kind of signal? He eskedged the Ra, pulled up the data stream, and let it apply a series of numbers. Pulsed through the speakers in a rhythm that felt almost alive. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19 prime numbers. She said the ancient texts say humans used this sequence as a universal greeting because mathematics is constant across all species. It could be anything. The Telhari representative said. But there was uncertainty in the harmonics of their voice. It could be a pulsar or a malfunctioning probe, or it came from dead space. Zethera interrupted. No stars, no planets, no known objects of any kind, and it repeated for exactly 72 hours before stopping. The chamber erupted in dozens of languages, all speaking at once. As Athera stood in the center of the chaos and felt vindication mixing with terror in her chest. She had their attention now, but she was not sure what would come. Next, Counselor Dren brought his hand down on the armrest of his chair with a sound like thunder. Order. He commanded, we will have order. The noise subsided slowly like a tide retreating from shore. Where did this signal originate? Drenaskejathora highlighted a region of space on the star map that hung above them. All it was far beyond the borders of known civilization, in an area that had never been explored because there was nothing there worth finding. 847 light-years from this station, she said. Ambassador Vokris made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. Irrelevant. He declared, we face war in 3 days, and you want us to chase phantom signals across the galaxy. Several other representatives voiced agreement. The Telhari representative stood and addressed the assembly. Our people are dying while the Kryn expand into our territory. They sang in their musical language, we have no time for treasure hunts. Zethera watched her life's work being dismissed against. She had spent 15 years collecting evidence and translating fragments and piecing together the puzzle of humanities. existence now when she finally had proof that demanded investigation. Politics was going to bury it. I propose we table this matter, Counselor Dren said. And Zathera heard the finality in his tone scholar. Zathera will submit her findings to the historical archives, and the Congress will return to the matter of the Krintelhari. Dispute no. Zathera said the word came out before she could stop at Dren's eye stalks, focused on her with surprise no. He repeated, someone sent that signal, Zathera said, her voice growing stronger. Someone who knows human mathematics and human methods of communication after 3,000 years of silence. Someone is trying to make contact, and we are going to ignore them because of a border dispute. This border dispute could destroy half the Congress species. Ambassador Vokris snarled, your mythical humans are not going to save us from war. Zathera met his gaze without flinching. Maybe they could. She said. The chamber fell silent again. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Counselor Dren rose to his full height, and his voice carried the weight of command. The matter is closed. He said, we will not divert resources to investigate signals from empty space while the peace of the galaxy hangs by a thread. This session is concluded. Zathera stood alone as the representatives filed out in clusters. Talking urgently among themselves, she looked up at the star map still hovering in the air. With the point of origin marked in pulsing red light Tate, 147 light-years away, someone was out there. She knew it in her bones, the way her ancestors must have known when they first looked up at the sky and wondered what lay beyond that. Night in her small quarters aboard the research vessel she had called home for a decade, Zathera made a decision that would change everything. She sat at her communications console and pulled up the reconstructed human language database she had built from fragments and guesswork. Her fingers trembled as she composed a message using words that might be completely wrong. She routed it through every amplifier she could access without authorization. Aimed it at those coordinates in dead space, and she transmitted 3 words in ancient human standard, followed by the same prime number sequence. We remember you. Then she waited somewhere in the darkness between stars. Her message raced toward whatever had called out to a galaxy that had forgotten. Zathera did not know if anyone would answer. She did not know if she had just made the greatest discovery in galactic history or the greatest fool of herself, but she knew she had to try because legends did not send mathematical sequences through the voidond. Myths did not wait 3,000 years to speak against something was out there, and Zathera had just invited it home. Admiral Alina Vasquez opened her eyes to a universe that had aged 3,000 years without Hertha. Hibernation pod hissed as it released her into the waking world, and she drew her first conscious breath in, longer than some civilizations had existed around her in the vast chamber. Other pods were opening in sequence like flowers blooming in fast motion. She felt the deck beneath her feet and knew without looking that she stood aboard the Perseverance. Flagship of humanity's Ark Fleet. James Chen was already awake in the command center when she arrived. His dark eyes were fixed on screens that showed more data than any human mind could process without assistance. Welcome back, Admiral, he said, without looking away from his work. How long? She asked. Though she already knew the question was ritual between them. They had woken before, during the journey at intervals to check their course and their cargo. 2,943 years since we left Earth, Chen replied, give or take a few months for relativistic effects. Vasquez moved to stand beside him and looked at the screen star charts. Energy readings, communication intercepts, and somewhere in all that data was the reason they had been awakened ahead of schedule. Talk to me, James, she said. Chun pulled up a display that showed a portion of space they had designated as the Galactic Core Sector 10 years ago. Ship time. Our listening arrays detected organized radio and quantum transmissions, he said, not random cosmic noise. Not natural phenomena, but actual communication. We knew there would be others. Vasquez said, we prepared for this, yes. Chen agreed. But we were not prepared for what we found. He played a series of intercepted transmissions, voices and languages that sounded almost familiar, spoke urgently about trade disputes and territorial boundaries and diplomatic protocols, mathematics and physics equations. Scrolled past in formats that made sense to human eyes, ship designs appeared that were clearly built by different species but followed principles that humanity had used. They are using our technology, Vasquez said quietly. Chen nodded. Jump drive configurations based on human FTL theory. He confirmed power generation systems that matched designs we shared with primitive species 3,000 years ago energy weapons. Defensive shields even. Their communication protocols show human influence. Vasquez felt something twist in her chest. Pride mixed with sadness mixed with fear. We succeeded then. She said we uplifted them and they survived some of them, Chen said. And his voice carried a weight that made her look at him sharply. He pulled up another screen showing what appeared to be battle damage on multiple space stations they are at war. Vasquez asked on the verge. Chen said 2 major alliances have been in conflict for the past standard year, and it is escalating border disputes. Resource conflicts. Usual triggers, they are about to tear each other apart using weapons we taught them to build. Vasquez closed her eyes for a moment. This was the nightmare scenario that had driven humanity's decision to leave in the first place. Not that the galaxy would forget them, but that the galaxy would remember them as weapons makers and conquerors. What else? She asked, knowing there had to be more. Chun hesitated, and that told her everything. Show me. She ordered. He pulled up a data file that had been marked with the highest security clearance. We have been monitoring their communications, he said, learning their languages, studying their cultures, trying to understand what we would find when we arrived, and we found something unexpected. The screen showed text in dozens of different alien languages, with human translations scrolling alongside stories, myths, legends, religious texts, all of them talking about humanity. They remember us. Vasquez breathed. Some of them, Chen corrected. Others think we are mythology. Ancient fairy tales their ancestors invented, but yes, Admiral, across multiple species, there are stories about the humans who came from the stars and gave them fire. Vasquez read through the translations. The Valerians called them sky teachers. The Korvathi named them the first wanderers. The Drans spoke of the gifters who appeared in their darkest hour and showed them the path to the heavens. We tried so hard to be forgotten. She said we left so they could grow without us, find their own way, become themselves instead of our children. Some did forget, Chen said. For others we became legend. Which might be worse. Legends set impossible standards. Vasquez turned away from the screens and looked out at the vast chamber where thousands of hibernation pods still held sleeping humans. 4 million people across 23 ships, the last great diaspora of humanity. They had left Earth when first contact scenarios kept turning violent. When humanity realized they were not ready to be part of a galactic community without trying to dominate it better, to scatter to the stars and grow up as a species than to become the monsters they feared they could be. Why did you wake me now, James? She asked. What changed? Chen pulled up the final piece of information, a transmission received just 3 days ago, a message in ancient human standard language. Grammatically imperfect, but unmistakably intentional. We remember you followed. By the prime number sequence humanity had once used as a universal greeting, someone called to us. Chen said quietly after 3,000 years of silence. Someone out there knows we existed and they reached out. Vasquez felt her pulse quicken. Where did it come from? A research vessel registered to someone named Zethara of the Valerian Scholarly Council. Chen said she has been studying human artifacts and advocating for our historical reality. Against significant opposition, she is either very brave or very desperate, maybe both. Vasquez said she looked at the message again. 3 words that changed everything. Assemble the command staff. She ordered wake the diplomats, the scientists, the first contact specialists, wake everyone we designated for initial arrival protocols. Are we really doing this? Chen asked, are we really going back? Vasquez met his eyes and saw her own uncertainty. Reflected there, they had debated this moment for years before they left Earth. What would they do if the galaxy still needed them? What would they do if the galaxy had become worse instead of better? What would they do if coming back meant becoming exactly what they had fled from? Someone remembered us? James, she said finally, someone kept our story alive through 3,000 years. And the species we tried to help are about to destroy each other with technology we gave them. We can run further into the dark, or we can go back and face. We created. Chen was quiet for a long moment before he nodded. The crew will want to vote. He said democracy did not end just because we went to sleep. I know. Vasquez said call the vote and let them decide, but tell them this. We left because we were not ready to use our power responsibly. We have had 3,000 years to think about who we want to be if we go back now. We go back as helpers, Not rulers as partners, not parents? Can we do that? Chen smiled faintly. I guess we're about to find out. He said 3 days later, the vote came back. Caddy 7% in favor of return. Remaining 13% were not opposed. Just cautious, they wanted guarantees that humanity would not repeat old mistakes. Stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and watched her fleet come alive around her 23 massive arc ships that had drifted in the dark for many hundreds of escort vessels, science ships, medical frigates, construction platforms, everything humanity needed to rebuild civilization from scratch, if necessary, navigation. She said, plot a course to the galactic core sector, engage jump drives on my mark. The jump drives were humanity's greatest achievement technology that bent space in ways the current galaxy could not match. They would cross 847 light years in a single week when they arrived. The galaxy would know that legends could be reland. Humanity would discover if they had truly learned anything from their long exile, or if they were still the same species that had fled in fear of their own potential. All ships report ready. Admiral, the navigation officer, said. Vasquez took a deep breath, then let us go home. She said, jump drives engaged, here we go. The stars stretched and reality folded, and the human fleet vanished from empty space, heading toward a galaxy that thought they were myths toward a war that threatened everything they had tried to build. A war. A young scholar who had dared to remember Vasquez stood at the center of it all and wondered if hope was enough. She supposed they were about to find out. Zathera had been running for 3 days when the universe tore itself open in front of her ship. She stared at the view screen as space itself seemed to fold and rupture like fabric being pulled apart at the seams. Her research vessel shuddered, and alarms screamed warnings that her navigation systems could not understand what they were seeing behind her. The Kryn warships that had been pursuing her across the neutral zone stopped dead, and Space Commander Torvik's voice came through on the communication channel with an edge of fear she had never heard from a Kryn warrior. What is that? He demanded. What have you done? Zathera had no answer, because she was watching something impossible emerge from the tear in reality. First came a ship larger than anything she had ever seen. It was a city floating in the void. A vessel so massive that her instruments could not get an accurate reading on its dimensions. Then came another, and Anatharunta 3 enormous ships appeared from nowhere like gods stepping down from heaven. Around them swarmed hundreds of smaller vessels that were still larger than most military cruisers. The fleet hung in space between Zathera and her pursuers, and the light from distant stars seemed to bend around them, scan them. Torvik ordered someone on his bridge. I want to know what we are facing. Zathera ran her own scans, even though her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the controls. The results made no sense of energy signatures that peeked off her instrument's hull. Materials that her sensors could not identify, weapon systems that did not match any known configuration in the galactic database, and shielding so dense that her scans could not penetrate past the outer layer. Unknown vessels. Torvik transmitted on all frequencies. You have entered a restricted military zone. Power down your drives and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. Zathera wanted to scream at him not to be stupid. Whatever these ships were, they could turn the Kryn battle group into debris without breaking formation. But before she could speak, a new voice came through the communication system. It was speaking Galactic Standard, with an accent that sounded like wind through ancient ruins. This is Captain Sarah Okonkwo of the human vessel Perseverance. The voice said. We are responding to a distress call from research vessel Bright Hope. Zathera of Valeria. Are you in need of assistance? Zathera? S. 3 hearts stopped, all of them at once. Human, the voice had said. Human, you are real, she whispered. Say again, Bright Hope? The voice responded. We did not copy your transmission. Zathera found her voice, though it came out shaky and broken. You are real, she said louder. The humans are real. I have spent my entire life trying to prove you existed, and you are real. There was a pause on the other end of the line when the voice came back. It carried warmth that made Zathera's eyes burn with tears. Yes. Captain Okonkwo said, we are real, and we received your message. Thank you for remembering us, Commander. Torvik was shouting something about unauthorized contact and violation of military protocols as ships were moving into attack formation around The human fleet Cythera watched in horror as targeting solutions appeared on her tactical display. Please do not attack them. She transmitted desperately Commander Torvik. These are the first wanderers, the species that gave us the stars. I do not care if they are gods from the void. Torvik snarled, they will submit to Kryn authority or face the consequences. One of the Kryn destroyers fired a warning shot across the bow of the nearest human escort ship. The bolt of superheated plasma streaked through space and dissipated harmlessly against a shield that did not even flicker. Final warning. Torvik announced, power down your vessels, or we will consider you hostile. Cythera was about to plead with him again, when something changed. The human escort ship that had been targeted moved. It did not use thrusters or engines or any propulsion system she could detect. It simply moved from one point in space to another, as if the distance between had stopped existing. It appeared next to the Kryn destroyer, and the destroyer stopped functioning. All systems, all power, all weapons went dark. The warship became a dead hulk floating in space. What did you do? Torvik screamed. What did you do to my ship? Captain Okonkwo's voice came back, calm and measured. We have temporarily disabled their power generation through controlled gravitational manipulation. She said no permanent damage has been done, and systems will restore in approximately 10 minutes. Consider this a demonstration of capabilities. We do not wish conflict, but we will not be threatened. Remaining Kryn ships held positions. Ethra could imagine Torvik on his bridge trying to decide if pride was worth dying for human vessels. He said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled rage, the Kryn Empire will hear of this violation. We look forward to formal diplomatic contact. Okonkwo replied, until then, we request you allow us to complete our rescue operation. The Kryn ships withdrew slowly like predators backing away from something they had mistakenly identified as prey as soon as they were out of weapons range. A smaller human ship detached from the main fleet and approached Zethra's vessel Bright Hope. We are sending a shuttle to bring you aboard Perseverance. Okonkwo said, Admiral Vasquez wishes to speak with you personally. Zethera could barely breathe. Admiral Vasquez, human name a human, who wanted to speak with her 20 minutes. Later, she stood in a docking bay that was larger than most space stations she had visited. The human shuttle had brought her through shields and security fields that her instruments could not even detect now. She waited as an airlock cycled and a door opened. The human who emerged was shorter than one. Zethra expected. She wore a uniform of deep blue with insignia that had no galactic equivalent. Her skin was dark, and her hair was cut short, and her eyes were the color of Earth's oceans in the old photographs. Zethera, Admiral Alina Vasquez said, and her smile was genuine. It is an honor to meet you. Zethera felt her legs go weak. She imagined this moment 1,000 times, but reality was overwhelming. The honor is mine, Admiral. She managed to say, I have studied your species my entire life. Everyone told me you were mythology. Vasquez stepped closer, and Zethera noticed she moved with the confidence of someone who had lived through things others could not imagine. We tried very hard to become mythology, Vasquez said. We left the galaxy so it could grow without us. But you remembered your message reached us across 800 light years and 3,000 years. That takes dedication. Tears were running down Zethera's face now, though she did not remember when she had started crying. My people, she said, the Valerians. You have stories about the sky teachers who lifted us from darkness. I always believed they were you. Something flickered in Vasquez's eyes, recognition and sadness, and something that looked like guilt. Come with me, she said. There is something you should see. She led Zethera through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The past humans who stopped and stared at the alien in their midst. With curiosity but not fear, finally, they reached a chamber filled with holographic displays. Dar James Chen was waiting there, surrounded by data streams. Zethera, Vasquez said, gesturing to one of the displays. This is the Valerian language database we compiled 3,000 years ago. The display showed images of Zethera's homeworld. From orbit cities that were now ancient ruins had been primitive villages in those villages. Figures in encounter suits worked alongside Valerians, who looked up at them with wonder. We came to your world when your people were just beginning to ask questions about the stars, Vasquez said quietly. We showed you agriculture that could feed millions instead of hundreds. We gave you basic tools in mathematics and left you to build from there. We did not want to make you dependent on us. Zathera watched her ancestors learning from humans and felt something shift in her understanding. Of history, you were real. She said again, our oldest stories are actual history. Yes, Vasquez confirmed. And we left because we were afraid of what we might become if we stayed. Afraid of making you into copies of us instead of letting you become yourselves. Why come? Back now? Zathera asked. Vasquez's expression hardened. Because we have been monitoring galactic communications for the past 10 years. She said, we know about the war that is coming. We know the Kryn and Telhari are about to tear each other apart. And we cannot watch the species we tried to help destroy themselves with technology we gave them. She pulled up another display. Showing battle damage and casualty reports. We came back because someone called to us. Vasquez said, because you remembered when others forgot. And because maybe we have finally learned how to help without controlling. Maybe Zathera looked at the humans in the chamber and the ships beyond and the weight of hope and history. What? Happens now? She asked. Vasquez smiled, but it did not reach her eyes now. She said, we go talk to the Galactic Congress. We tell them who we are and why we left and why we came back, and we hope they listen before it is too late, will they? Vasquez was quiet for a moment. I do not know, she admitted, but we have to try. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is showing up when everyone thought you were gone forever outside the viewports. The human fleet prepared to jump to the Galactic Congress. Zathera stood among legends made. Fleshhand wondered if the galaxy was ready for humanity's returner, if humanity was ready for what they would find. The Galactic Congress had never seen so many warships and one Plaskrin battle fleets formed up on one side of the station, while Telhari defense forces mirrored them on the other. Neutral species had their own vessels scattered throughout the region, like nervous spectators at a sporting event that might turn deadly and surrounding everything in a loose sphere that could become a cage. The human fleet waited in silence. High Counselor Dren stood in the emergency session chamber and felt the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. The gallery was packed with representatives from every member species. Military observers watched from secure channels, news feeds broadcast to billions across the galaxy, and, at the center of it all, Admiral Elena Vasquez stood beside Zethareth. Human looked small, compared to many of the assembled Bingstrin. Himself towered over her by several body lengths, but there was something in her bearing that made size irrelevant. She stood like someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall and learned not to flinch at either. The emergency session will come to order, Dren announced. His voice amplified through the chamber. We are gathered to address the matter of the human fleet's arrival. War Marshal Krovik of the Kryn Empire rose from his seat, with scales gleaming under the harsh lights. I demand to know, by what authority these aliens enter our space without permission? He snarled, we demand they explain their weapons and their technology and their intentions. Triarch Celis of the Telhari Coalition stood as well, and her voice rang like crystal chimes. We echo the Kryn concern, though it pains us to agree with them on anything. She said, unknown forces appearing during a time of crisis cannot be tolerated. Vasquez waited until the initial outcry died down when she spoke. Her voice carried through the chamber with a clarity that made everyone stop and listen. High Counselor Dren. Honored representatives. She began, my name is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Ark Fleet. We come in response to a call from one of your own, and we come to prevent a tragedy. You speak of preventing tragedy while surrounding us with warships. Krovik challenged, that is not the action of peacekeepers. Our warships are defensive. Vasquez replied calmly, we position them to protect ourselves and to ensure this conversation could happen. But you are correct that actions speak louder than words, so let me tell you what we did and why we did it. She gestured, and holographic displays activated around the chamber. Images appeared of Earth, ancient and beautiful, hanging in space like a blue jewel 3,000 years ago. Humanity discovered we were not alone in the universe. Vasquez said we went to the stars expecting to find friends, and instead we found fear species that saw us as threats, as conquerors, as something to be destroyed before we could destroy them. The images shifted to show early contact scenarios gone wrong, human ships burning in space colonies. Wiped out by preemptive strikes, diplomatic missions that ended in violence. We realized we had a choice. Vasquez continued. We could fight for our place in the galaxy, or we could leave and let the galaxy develop without us. We chose to leave, but before we left, We tried to help. New images appeared showing humans working alongside dozens of different species. Building, sharing knowledge. Dren recognized some of the species, the Valerians, when they were barely out of their Stone Age. Korvathi, struggling with basic metallurgy. The Dran, who had nearly destroyed themselves in a global war. We gave technology to species who needed it. Vasquez said jump drive theory, power generation, medical advances, agricultural techniques. We tried to give you the tools to reach for the stars on your own, and then we left because we were afraid of what we might become if we stayed. Krovik made a dismissive sound. You expect us to believe you fled out of altruism. He demanded you abandon the galaxy out of cowardice, and now you return with superior weapons and claim peaceful intentions. Expect you to believe the truth, Vasquez said, and her voice hardened. We left because we were not ready to be part of a galactic community without trying to dominate it. We saw the patterns in ourselves. The desire to control, to manage, to play God with species we considered less advanced, so we chose exile over empire. She pulled up new data showing the human monitoring programs that had watched galactic development from afar. We have been observing from the shadows for 3,000 years. She said we watched the species, we helped grow and change and face their own challenges. We wanted you to find your own paths, not follow ours. We wanted you to become yourselves. Not copies of us. Matriarch Celis leaned forward with her crystalline features reflecting the holographic light, if this is true. She said, why return now? Why reveal yourselves after so long? Vasquez looked at Zethera, and something passed between them because someone remembered us. She said, because Zethera of Valeria spent her life proving we existed, and she reached out across the darkness to call us home, and because you are about to destroy each other over resources and territory that do not need to be fought over. She pulled up tactical data on the disputed border regions and energy readings. Mineral surveys. Spatial analysis. The zones you are fighting over contain enough resources for both your empires and a dozen more, Vasquez said. But you lack the technology to extract them efficiently. Your current methods would take centuries and cost more than the resources are worth. We have technology that could extract these resources in months. We have manufacturing techniques that could process them into materials both sides need. We have solutions that make this war pointless. Akrovik was on his feet instantly. You think you can bribe us into submission? He roared the Kryn. Do not beg for scraps from returning ghosts. We are not offering scraps. Vasquez said we are offering partnership access to human technology in exchange for allowing us to rejoin galactic civilization as equals, not as rulers, not as saviors, but as partners. And why should we trust you? Krovik demanded. What stops you from using this technology to control us? Vasquez was quiet for a moment when she spoke again. Her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of reflection. Nothing. She admitted you have no reason to trust us except our word and our actions. We could have arrived with weapons ready and demanded submission. We could have chosen sides in your conflict and tipped the balance with our military superiority. Instead, we came to talk. We came to offer help without conditions. We came because we have finally learned that the greatest power is knowing when not to use it. Dr. James Chen stepped forward from where he had been standing at the edge of the gathering. The Kryn military is formidable, he said, addressing Krovik directly. Your battle doctrine is aggressive, and your warriors are among the finest in the galaxy. But your casualty projections for this war are catastrophic. He pulled up data that made several representatives gasp. Numbers that showed hundreds of thousands dead on both sides, as economies shattered, colonies destroyed, generations lost to a conflict neither side could truly win. We intercepted communications from your own strategists. Chen continued, they know this war will destroy both empires. They know victory will be indistinguishable from defeat, but political pressure and military pride are driving you forward anyway. Kravik's scales rattled with suppressed rage. You dare to lecture us while spying on our communications? He hissed. We dare to show you the truth. Chen replied, your own people do not want this war. He pulled up personal messages intercepted from Kryn military vessels, letters to families, private conversations between soldiers, doubts expressed when officers thought no one was listening. Chamber fell silent as Kravik's own warriors spoke through the records about their fear and their certainty that the war was wrong. You violated our privacy, Krovik said, but his voice had lost its edge. We did. Vasquez acknowledged, and we apologize for that. But we thought it was more important to save lives than to respect protocols. Sometimes the moral choice is not the legal one. She turned to address the full assembly. We are not here to force peace. She said, we are not here to dictate terms or impose our will. We are here because we made a mistake 3,000 years ago. We gave you technology without wisdom, tools without teaching, power without guidance, and then we left you to figure it out alone. We are here to correct that mistake, not by controlling you, but by standing beside you, not as parents who know better, but as partners who have made their own mistakes and learned from them. Matriarch Celis rose slowly, and her voice carried a note of cautious hope. If we accept your offer, she said. What exactly are you proposing? Vasquez pulled up a comprehensive plant technology sharing agreements, resource extraction protocols, diplomatic frameworks. We propose a trial period, she said. 1 standard year where human engineers work alongside Kryn and Telhari specialists to extract and process the disputed resources. Profits split evenly between all parties at the end of that year. If both sides are satisfied, we formalize long-term agreements. If not, we withdraw and you resume your conflict. And what do you gain from this? Celis asked. A place in the galaxy we once fled. Vasquez said, simply a chance to prove we have changed, to hope that we can help build something better than what we left behind. Krovik stood in silence for a long time. His claws scraped against the armrest of his chair. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was weary. I need to consult with my government, he said. The extraction site hummed with activity that would have been impossible a month ago. Gokran engineers worked alongside Telhari specialists, while human technicians moved between them, offering guidance and adjustments. The disputed asteroid field that had nearly sparked a galactic war now buzzed with cooperation. Instead of conflict, Admiral Alina Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Joint Operations Station and watched 3 species build something together beside her. Zathera made notes on a datapad while trying not to look too pleased with herself. The efficiency reports are exceeding projections, Zathera said. Resource extraction is ahead of schedule by 17%. Processing yields are higher than anyone predicted. Vasquez smiled faintly. Turns out people work better together than they do trying to kill each other, she said. Revolutionary concept. War Marshal Krovik approached from behind with his footsteps heavy on the deck plating. Had shed most of his ceremonial armor in favor of a simple work uniform. It made him look less like a warrior and more like someone who had rediscovered a purpose beyond violence. Admiral, he said with a nod of respect that would have been unthinkable a month ago. My engineers tell me the new extraction arrays you provided will cut our timeline in half. Your engineers are quick learners, Vasquez replied. They adapted to the technology faster than we expected. Krovik made a sound that might have been Kryn laughter. We Kryn are stubborn, but we are not stupid, he said. When someone offers us a better way, we are smart enough to take it eventually. He looked out at the work crews moving in coordinated patterns through the asteroid field. I almost started a war over these rocks, he said quietly. I was ready to send thousands of my people to die for pride and territory. You were doing what you thought was right. Vasquez said, sometimes the hardest thing is admitting when circumstances change. Your people did not die, and that is what matters, Matriarch. Celis joined them at the viewport, and her crystalline form refracted light in patterns that indicated contentment. The first shipment of processed materials departed this morning. She reported both Kryn and Telhari governments have confirmed receipt and satisfaction with quality. This partnership is working, Admiral, better than anyone dared hope. Vasquez felt something ease in her chest that had been tight for 3,000 years. This was what humanity had wanted when they first reached for the stars. Not conquest, not domination, but cooperation, building things together that no single species could build. Alondar James Chen appeared in the doorway of the observation deck, looking slightly disheveled. You need to see this, he said. All of you. They followed him to the communication center, where multiple screens showed news feeds from across the galaxy. Every major network was broadcasting the same story from different angles. Human revelation has spread faster than we anticipated, Chen said. Every species is reacting. The screen showed a mixture of responses. Species celebrated the return of the legendary first wanderers. Others expressed fear and called for military preparedness. A Few claim the whole thing was an elaborate hoax. Look at this one, Chen said, pulling up a feed from the Dran homeworld. The broadcast showed massive crowds gathered in city centers. They were not protesting or panicking. They were celebrating the Dran remember us, Vasquez said softly. Their oldest stories speak of the gifters who came during their darkest hour. They have been waiting for us to return. Another screen showed a more skeptical response from the Korvathi. Senate representatives argued about whether to accept human technology or reject it as a threat to sovereignty. Not everyone is happy. We are back. Chen observed some species built their identities around being self-made. Independent, our return complicates that narrative. They will come around or they will not. Vasquez said, we cannot force acceptance. We can only keep proving through. Our actions that we mean what we say. High Counselor Dren appeared on one of the communication channels. His massive form filled the screen as he addressed them from the Galactic Congress. Admiral Vasquez, he said, the Congress has reached a decision regarding humanity's petition to join as a member species. Vasquez felt everyone in the room tenses. Was the moment that would define everything that came after the vote was not unanimous. Dren continued, there were concerns about human military capabilities and questions about long-term intentions. However, by a margin of 34-13, the Congress has voted to accept humanity as a provisional member species, provisional for a period of 5 standard years, while we assess integration and cooperation. Vasquez let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Thank you, Counselor. She said, we accept the terms and we will work to prove ourselves worthy of full membership. I have no doubt you will, Dren replied. You have already changed the galaxy simply by returning to it. Now we will see what you can build after the transmission ended. Sethera turned to Vasquez with moisture gleaming in her eyes. You did it, she said. You came home. We came home. Vasquez corrected. You called us back without you. We would still be wandering in the dark, a young voice interrupted from the doorway. Are we really staying? Everyone turned to see a human child standing there with wide eyes. Kenji Torres was 8 years old and had been born during the long voyage. He had never seen Earth, never walked on a planet, never known anything but the Ark ships. His grandfather, Dr. Chen, moved to his side and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Yes, Kenji. Chen said, we are staying. Will I get to meet aliens? Kenji asked with the directness of children. Krovik made that sound again. That might have been laughter. Young human, he said, kneeling down to be closer to the boy's eye level. You are meeting one right now, Kenji studied the Kryn warrior with unfiltered curiosity. You are very tall, he observed, and you have cool scales. Can I touch them? Krovik extended one arm and let the child run small fingers over his scales. When I was your age, Krovik said, my grandfather told me stories about the first wanderers who gave us the stars. I thought he was telling fairy tales, but here you are. Here we are. Kenji agreed. Vasquez watched the exchange and felt something shift in her understanding of what they had accomplished. This was not about grand political movements or military demonstrations. It was about a child meeting an alien without fear, about a warrior sharing stories instead of drawing weapons, about species learning to siege other as people instead of threats. Admiral, Chen said quietly, drawing her attention to another screen. You should see this. The display showed a transmission from deep space, multiple signals, actually, coming from different vectors. More human fleets? Vasquez asked. 3 more that we have detected so far. Chen confirmed they took different routes when we scattered and they are responding to our arrival. The galaxy is about to get a lot more crowded with humanity. Vasquez considered the implications. Different fleets meant different cultures, different technologies, different perspectives. Humanity had not been one unified species when they left, and 3,000 years of separation would have made them even more diverse. Contact them, she ordered. Invite them to join us, but make it clear we are partners with the galaxy now, not conquerors. They need to understand what we are building here, and if they do not agree, Chen asked, then we will deal with that when it happens, Vasquez said. But I have faith that most of us learn the same lessons from our exile over the next weeks. The galaxy transformed in ways large and small. Human technology began spreading through trade agreements and cooperation. Pact species that had been enemies for generations found common ground and shared projects. The Galactic Congress expanded to accommodate new voices and new perspectives. Not everything went smoothly. There were protests against human involvements, Some species refused contact entirely. Few incidents of violence erupted when fear overwhelmed reason, but slowly. Steadily, the galaxy began to accept that legends could be real and that sometimes the most powerful thing was not strength, but the wisdom to know. When not to use it, Vasquez stood in the garden dome of Perseverance and looked at the small tree. Growing there, it had been a seedling when they left Earth 3,000 years ago, carefully preserved. Genetically stable, waiting for the day it could be planted somewhere permanent. You are thinking about Earth, Zathera said. Joining her among the growing things, I am thinking about home, Vasquez corrected, which is not quite the same thing anymore. Will you go back? Zathera asked, eventually. Vasquez said, Earth is a memorial now, reminder of where we came from and why we left, but it is not where we belong anymore. We belong here. Among the stars, among the species, we tried to help building something better than what we left. Behind, Zathera was quiet for a moment before speaking again. My people have a saying, she said. The greatest teachers are those who know when to step back and let their students become teachers themselves. You gave us the stars, and then you left us to find our own way among them. That took more courage than staying ever would have. Vasquez smiled. We did not feel courageous. She admitted we felt afraid and uncertain, and deeply aware of our own capacity for terrible mistakes. But maybe that is what real courage is, acting despite the fear. Not in the absence of it, Kenji appeared among the plants with dirt on his hands and excitement in his eyes. Grandfather says, I can help plant the first Earth tree on the new colony world, he announced.